Thanks very much for inviting me. Thanks very much for coming. I always do this. Promise that I'm going to talk about meerkats, but end up talking about baboons. But this is the last time I'm going to have to do it. And I always have a lot of videos, so there's very little science. But you will, at the end of it, know a lot about baboon behavioural ecology. But just to get started, if you... so the first question that one has to ask if you want to know why baboons don't have culture is what is animal culture, and why we should be interested in it. So culture is the non-genetic, i.e. social transmission of behavioural styles to the next generation. So that's just a fancy way of saying that some kind of behaviour transmits across generations that's passed on socially rather than genetically. So the famous examples of culture in animals includes the tool use in chimpanzees, which I think most people are familiar with. So chimps use tools to get food, and to actually use it in displays as well. And then the other really famous example is the potato washing in macaques. So there's a Japanese project that's been studying macaques for a very long time. They were provisioning their macaques with sweet potatoes, and then one of the juvenile females in this group that had been provisioned learned that if she dips her sweet potato in water, then the sand will wash off of it and it'll be much cleaner. And then they subsequently learned, and that behaviour transmitted to other individuals within her group. And they subsequently learned that if they dip it in salty water, then it tastes really good. So this group of macaques dips sweet potato that they're given in salty water. And this is a very famous example, but it's also very contrived because it's a provisioned group of animals. But these are the classic animal culture examples. Okay, so I'm interested in understanding the evolution of culture for obvious reasons, like how is it that humans got such a complex culture? But to understand the evolution of culture, I'm going to argue that we can learn more by understanding which animals don't have culture and why they don't have culture. For those of you who have been here for the last 2 years longer, knows that I study baboons, and I'm going to argue that these guys are a great model for studying culture because they learn from each other socially, if you remember from the first year that I gave one of these talks. So they learn from each other about novel foods and which ones are good to eat and where to find foods in novel places. So they're a good species to understand who doesn't have culture but does learn socially. So they have the potential for transmitting behavioural styles socially. And my question is why? And they're also a good species, not only because they learn socially, but because they have something that looks kind of cultural that's going on. So this is our group of Chacma baboons, and this tree here is called a Prosopis glandulosa, what is it? Oh, I can't, mesquite. And it was introduced into Namibia about 70 years ago to feed cattle. And the baboons eat everything on this tree. They eat the bark, they eat the leaves, they eat the flowers, they eat the seed pods. So some stage in the last 70 years, somebody has learned to eat this new species of tree, and I'm going to guess that that is transmitted socially. It wasn't just that everybody independently learnt and then showed it to their offspring, and that there was social transmission about this particular tree. And I'm cheating a little bit because there's one species of baboon which has been shown to have culture previously. So this is olive baboon. So I work on Chacmas. These are olive, which are actually much smaller, even though they look bigger. They're just a lot fluffier than the Chacmas. And there was a very unique situation where there, in this particular study troop in Tanzania, no, yes, in Tanzania, or Kenya, anyway, East Africa somewhere. In this particular study troop, several of the older adult, more dominant and aggressive males were selectively culled, basically. So they were eating food out of a garbage dump, and they were eating meat that was infected with tuberculosis. So all of the aggressive males who were competitive enough to get access to this highly preferred food source, which happened to contain tuberculosis, all died. And what you were left with was the males and females who were a lot more pacific about how they behaved with one another. So in this troop, what you ended up with was really affiliative individuals. I'm going to show you some video of affiliation in a minute. But what you ended up with was a lot of affiliative individuals who used social bonds to get access to food and things instead of using aggression. So this is a picture of two adult males grooming each other, which will never, ever, ever happen in any other troop except for this one here. So that particular behaviour, they called it a Pacific culture. It lasted across at least one generation and then was lost subsequently. So this is the only example that I know of a culture persisting across generations of a particular social style, behavioural style in all of baboons. Okay, so as I said, so that's the background. I'm going to give you now some an idea of the context that I'm working in. I've got an 8-minute video of what it's like to work with the baboons. So we studied 2 troops. There's over 150 individuals that we've been following for, well, I've been working there for 7 years. There's extreme climatic variation there. They live in a desert. And they're experimentally manipulable, which I'll show you some video of after I give you this introduction of what it's like to work with baboons. So this is a very cheesy introduction to, I'm going to put this volume up so you can hear, to what it's like to do fieldwork in Namibia. So we get up before dawn, so we do full day follows. So we get to the sleeping cliff super early in the morning. Sometimes it's really unfortunate in as much as you have to walk to the sleeping cliff. So this is us in the dark walking to where the baboons are sleeping. And we have to get there early in the morning, because we're just yawning, because the baboons actually, this is like more getting to the sleeping cliff here, sorry about that, because the baboons actually move off as soon as it gets a little bit light. So as you can see in this next little video, they're starting to leave the sleeping cliff. And we have to be there when they do that, otherwise we lose them for the day. It's really, it can get really tricky. So this is what the sleeping cliffs look like. So that was one of my volunteers down the bottom. This is the baboons at the top of the sleeping cliff, and this is a PhD student getting up onto the sleeping cliff to collect data early in the morning. It's so cute. So we follow them around. They get aggressive. We follow them around all day, and this is, oh yeah, this is a wahoo. So the males perform the competitive bounce, making these wahoo noises. We collect data on that as well. And then we spend the entire day following them around. So that looks something like this. So wherever the baboons go, i.e. through a thicket, then we also have to go through a thicket. This guy's trying to ID individuals ahead because this male is in consortium with that female, and we collect data on sexual consortships. This is the middle of the day when the baboons are moving around. This is a really nice part when they're actually all in a group together. Like, it's very difficult to get this kind of footage. I'm giving a very biased idea of what it's like to work with the baboons. But also baby monkeys are really cute. Cool. So yeah, so wherever the baboons go, we go for the entire day. That can be pretty difficult at some stages. If they go up a tree, obviously we can't go up a tree, so we just stand at the bottom with our field gear. Trying to still see the baboons. And we collect data onto little PDAs with this little, like it's just a Samsung iPhone thing. And we write down everything that the baboons are doing. Most of what the baboons do is feed. So they do this all day long. So they live in a desert, all of the food is of low nutritional value, and so they spend a very large part of their day eating, in this case, seed pods. And here they're picking insects off of branches. They dig up seeds that have worms in them, in this case, so you can see her very dexterously manipulating a tiny, tiny seed pod there to get a worm out of it. And then, this is my favourite, like giant monkeys handling very tiny seeds in these big pods. And again, just a cute baby because they're adorable. Eating. And then babies are so numerous that they drop from the sky. So cute. Okay, right, so the middle of the day is when there's a lot of resting, so it gets really, it's actually quite cold in the middle of the day in winter, but it gets hot in the summer, and then the baboons just sit around resting. This is one of my personal favourites, but my absolute all-time favourite is just over a log, which is fantastic. It's also the time when the babies become really entertaining, and those mothers, like, they have so much patience. They're amazing, but they are adorable. So you have to let them get away with everything. And again, just keep babies playing while everybody else is resting. So baboons are really, really well known for. So sweet, cute. Okay, cool. So So baboons, well, all primates are really well known for grooming, and in the baboons, grooming is incredibly political. So it looks like it has a hygienic function in the baboons that we study. They live in a desert, it's incredibly clean, and they rarely find anything to eat that isn't a scab. So if there is anything on the skin, they'll pick it off. You'll see mostly they're just picking at scabs. But they use grooming to negotiate tolerance at food sites, for access to infants. You'll see some video of that in a minute as well. For access to good social partners in terms of sexual favours for males, and for females. Females exert quite a bit of choice over who they want to be with. One of the biggest uses is to access infants. Nobody knows why, but baboons are absolutely obsessed with other females' babies. I mean, they're adorable, but still, like, it's an amazing obsession. And so this female here would groom this female for 20 minutes just so that she could pick up this little infant for 5 seconds. It's pretty amazing. And then at the end of the day, we follow them back to the sleeping cliff. So this is one of our biggest sleeping cliffs here. And then we leave them there, come home, input all our data, eat dinner, sleep because we're exhausted because we've been following baboons for 13 hours, and then do it all again the very next day. Yeah, so that is basically a baboon day. We don't leave them until it gets dark, but of course that's boring footage, so I'm just showing you a cute brother, couple of brothers that are very different in age. There. Okay, so the stuff that I'm interested in are these affiliative behaviours. So this one is really quick. She's pulling her ears back. That's called a come hither face. And she's just indicating that she wants to associate with somebody else. There is a lot going on in this video, I apologise. But in any case, this guy here is presenting to the guy behind, who lip smacks and then embraces him and then moves off. So that was 3 things going on there. This is another embrace, lip smack. It's just a bit intense, super sweet. Right, so that's just a greeting, a general greeting. This is called a present, like that male did, but it's completely ignored. So what she wants is that male to do the lip smacking and the embracing, like the grabbing of the hindquarters, but he just ignores her. And so she stands there very patiently for a while before getting freaked out because he's actually really dominant. And then she runs off. Okay, and then the flip side to being affiliative is aggression. So for the most part, it's really low key. So this is another one of those presents that's being ignored. And this male is not doing anything until she walks away and then he starts foraging again. But this is the aggression here. So that's called a supplant. She's taken the place that the other individual was feeding straight off of that other individual. So she's dominant to him. This is another supplant, but this guy is upset about it and backed off because this guy is actually really aggressive and a bit of a dick. It escalates a little bit. So this individual here, this is where we sleep, intense, is threatening that individual below, and then they chase that other individual. This is classic threatening behaviour. So this individual is really upset with that one, and she's trying to ignore this individual, who is higher ranked but much smaller, and so she's pretending like nothing is going on, and he's trying to get support from other individuals to be aggressive. And then this is like the more extreme kind of aggression and attack. She's grabbed on and is biting the hindquarters of that female bear. So that's the kind of range of aggression that we get. It obviously gets a little bit more aggressive than that. That's just between 2 females. When the males get involved, it's just horrible. Okay, that shouldn't be saying feeding. Okay, awesome. So back to the science, which is also a lot of videos, I promise. So just to reiterate the question that I'm interested in, so what can be learned from species that don't have culture but do learn socially? And what I wanted to do was establish what are known as traditions. So tradition is like a culture, but it's not multi-generational. Obviously, baboons, they live for 25 years. I can't try and establish a behavioural trait that will transmit across generations because I don't have 25 years of funding. So I'm trying to establish a behavioural style within a generation. So the first one that I wanted to look at was whether monkeys could find a food that they really prefer, corn kernels, inside these gift boxes. I literally gave them presents of corn. And then the second one that I wanted to do was establish a tradition of eating apricots. So I was giving them dried apricots, and I wanted to know whether I could get everybody in the group to learn how to do this. So these, they're not very difficult experiments, but actually doing work with wild monkeys is not that easy. But I'll show you some of the experiments that we did. So in this video that I'm going to show you, so you can see her with the gift box. She's found a gift box, she's picked it up. These two females over here are interesting because she doesn't know that there's food in there, but she does. So you'll see immediately what happens when an individual knows that there's food in the box. And when one doesn't. Okay, so she sees the box and she comes over. So this female actually is lower ranking, but baboons, once they've got something, it's very difficult to get it off of them. So she's trying to go over to get the box off of her. And they sit there like for 2 minutes, not doing anything. And it's not until she goes to play with the baby over there that she solves the task and finds the food. And then both of those individuals rush over to take the food off of her because they both outrank her. She gets really angry. She gets really angry. And then this other individual comes over who also knows about the food in the box. Okay, so in that case, that individual just had an opportunity to learn about the food in the box, but this individual and this individual already knew. Okay, so it doesn't have to be as exciting as that. So this was, so I was trying to test this male actually, but then a dominance thing happened. So two big males come along and then they like stand next to each other and get really upset and then stalk around. I thought this was going to be a disaster because there's this tiny male here who's sticking his head out of the bush, and tiny males, like, they just run like crazy. So this was going to be a bad trial, but then the most amazing thing happens. So he goes to get the box, and this adult female comes out of the bushes and then takes it away. I get so excited because I actually really like that female. Okay, so she goes off to solve the task, and then these individuals follow her to find her. Sorry about my terrible videography, it's really just to dictate what's going on in case I miss anything. Okay, so she solves the task, and then some other individuals come over and also learn about the task. So this is exactly what I'm interested in. So who will adopt the trait after seeing somebody else perform it? Okay, so you can see information transmission is really obvious. You don't have to work very hard to quantify who knows about the task. In baboons it's obvious. Okay, so the other tradition that I wanted to establish was to get baboons eating apricots, which is actually a lot more difficult than it sounds. Apricots smell really bad if you smell them. They smell terrible. You really have to taste them, and then not very many baboons like eating apricots in the first instance. So those experiments looked something like this. For the most part, it's usually the juveniles that learn first. So this individual here has the apricot and is being watched very closely by the other juvenile here who's trying to taste it. That was horrible. And then being watched by this other juvenile male here. So again, just to show you that it's really easy to quantify who gets information about this particular task. And then it doesn't have to be as involved as that. They don't have to watch all that much. So in this trial, this female, she just loved apricot, and it was she had some of the most amazing trials. When nobody else would eat it, she was consistently one that would, to the point where it got a little bit frustrating because nobody else would learn. So I'm trying to get her to eat this apricot, and then along comes this female. And then she starts eating it, and then you'll see her just glance up very briefly there. And then again, and that's it, that's all she saw. So she knew the food was there, she knew that she picked it up and she knew that she ate it, but she got that in those two glances. And I thought that I was I thought that was a disaster of a trial, but the next time I tested her, she ate it. So it doesn't take very much at all for individuals to learn. Okay, and it also doesn't take, this is one of my favorite videos, it doesn't take seeing actually eating the food. So in this case, she's consuming the food, and this individual is smelling her mouth to find out what she's eating. So but that started a chain of mouth smelling. This is just amazing, of individuals who come along and want to know. So they all see them sniffing the mouth, and then information is transmitted without actually even seeing the food, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, so baboons aren't known to have culture, and while I was doing these experiments, there were two observations that I made that I thought would prevent behaviours transmitting throughout the troop. So the first one of them is deception. So in this video, I know that this individual will eat the food, and I know that that individual won't, so I want him to eat it in front of her, and what he does is go and sit behind her. She's higher ranking than he is, but he's bigger than her, so he doesn't have to leave, but he's gone and sat behind her so that she can't see what's going on. And this happened a lot, like really a lot. It was so frustrating. So here's another example of that happening. This is a little bit of a trickier situation, one of my first trials. So the box is here. This is one of the dominant adult males in the troop. And this individual is a sub-adult male, so he could get like in a lot of trouble if he does something that the dominant male doesn't like. So he sat there for 3 minutes while the dominant male foraged, keeping an eye on this box, and then waited for the dominant male to leave before approaching the box. And so you can see him checking over his shoulder that the dominant male is actually leaving. And then he picks up the box, checks again that nobody's watching, and then leaves with it. It's so frustrating. So he takes it to where nobody can see it, and then he sits there and then he opens it. So frustrating. But this is the kind of deception that I'm talking about. It's not very complex, but it is. They're definitely aware of what others can see and what others perceive, and then they change their behaviour to fix that. In this trial, it was great. These guys became really interested and ran over, and at least they got information about the task. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to go back to this video that I explained to you already to say that this individual, who in this case just sees this individual eating it for those 2 short glances, she'd already seen other individuals eating this food multiple times before this. So this is called directed social learning. So if an individual is more willing to pay attention to somebody who's got the same characteristics, or so this individual's in the same peer group as she is. And it's the same case for this one. So this individual is willing to eat the food. She's seen it several times, at least 5 times before that, and seen other individuals eating it, but it's not until she sees this individual, who's in her peer group, eat the food, that she eats it the next time. And I love the look on her face. She's super cute, watching her, and then looking at me, and then watching her. She's like, what do you mean? It's edible. Anyway, that's great. Okay, so I thought that those 2 combinations of traits would, so this directed social learning and deception, would prevent information from transmitting to like half the members of the troop. Oh, and this is a great one. This is another example of where directed social learning doesn't work. So this female, so annoying. So she's just seen somebody else eat the food, and so I thought, oh great, best time to present it to her, but she doesn't eat it. And then these juveniles who are sitting at her feet pick up the food that she's just dropped and then start eating it. And she doesn't watch them. She just doesn't look at all. It's so frustrating. But the reasoning there is that juveniles have nothing to teach individuals who are older. So it's usually juveniles who are paying attention to older individuals. I mean, in this case, it's a classic, an older adult individual who's not paying attention to juveniles. And I should mention here that it's usually the juveniles that discover novelty and discover novel things and start eating novel food. So again, I thought this would prevent information from transmitting to individuals in the troop. She just never learned. So frustrating. Okay, so my one results slide. It's a pretty complicated one. So we've got the trial number along the bottom. So this is the number of times that I've presented the box or the fruit to the troops. And I've got 2 troops. So we've got one troop will be plotted here and the other troop will be plotted here. And then I've got the cumulative proportion of the troop that has adopted the trait. So I'm interested in the number of times that individuals can learn for themselves. So that's the personal information, that'll be the grey dots. And then the number of times that individuals, or the proportion of the troop that has had an opportunity to learn from somebody else. So that's social information, and those will be the white dots. And then the coloured dots will reflect the individuals who have actually solved it. So for the box, that's opening the box and finding the food, and for the food, it's eating the fruit. Okay. So because it's complicated, I'm going to put it up and explain it here as well. So this is the number of times individuals have had social information. So that increases incredibly rapidly because in multiple trials, lots of individuals can see somebody manipulating the task. And then the personal information is a little bit slower because it takes, because one individual is manipulating the task, then multiple individuals can see it. But what I wanted was that nearly everybody in the troop to have both personal and social information of the task. And then I was interested in how many individuals in the group actually solved it. So you can see that this is for the box trial. Within 50 trials, I have way over 50% of the group opening the box, and finding food in it, which means I've established a tradition. Okay, so this shows the rest of the graphs. And so they're all pretty much the same thing. So this troop learnt very quickly. As soon as they had personal information, they'd solve the task. But I had a bit of a tricky time with the troop where I showed you with that female like not eating but I still got there in the end. After 150 trials in 3 weeks, I had 50% of the group eating, well, of the known individuals in the group eating the fruit. So these results seem to suggest that baboons can have culture, or at least can have traditions, which is counter to my hypotheses. And the other thing that I should mention, if you remember last year's talk, I'm interested in which social network the information transmits through. So it turns out that the 5 meter proximity rule is the best for predicting information transmission in the box task. But for the food task, there was no social transmission through the social network. So although they learned, it's weird, right? So although they saw got social information through the social network, the actual adoption of the task didn't transmit through the social network because it was a bit, because it didn't go in the order that they learnt about the task, if that makes any sense. So it's usually the juveniles that like acquire the trait first, and then the adults that acquire it later. But that doesn't follow the social network. So just to point out here that if you were going to do something like network-based diffusion analysis, this very fancy statistical technique for looking at socially transmitted behaviours, it wouldn't be picked up in the baboons, despite the fact that I know that they learn socially about the task. But that's a very field-specific point that you guys don't have to pay any attention to. Okay, so I've kind of shown now that habitual traditions can be experimentally induced through social learning in baboon groups. So why don't they have culture? If I can get traditions to form within 3 weeks, why don't they? So my first hypothesis is that no one's looked yet. So that's the most obvious one. And I don't really know why, because there are lots of people that do baboon studies, but they don't seem to talk to one another. So I'm going to ask the other baboon researchers about potentially cultural behaviours in their groups. That's the next thing to do. But to go back to the definition of culture, which I think is the problematic part here. So the definition was non-genetic, i.e. social transmission of behavioural styles to the next generation. Most people assume that this means that there is between group differences within populations. So the easiest way to say that a trait is cultural is to show that one group here has it and a neighbouring group with the same resources in the same environmental area doesn't have it. And so I think people assume that there has to be between group differences, but that's actually not part of the definition. So I've got a couple of hypotheses for what's going on in the baboons and why people haven't looked yet for this. So first, I've just shown you information diffusion is incredibly rapid. So once a novel behaviour is introduced, as long as there are individuals who keep doing that behaviour, it'll spread throughout the troop incredibly rapidly. The second one is that there's extensive home range overlap and regular mixing of individuals in baboons. So this means that, so if we think about that invasive species that the baboons adopted into their diet 70 years ago, or I assume 70 years ago when the plant came through, all of the baboons in that area would have had access to those trees because their home ranges overlap a lot. In chimpanzees, for example, the home ranges don't. So they have a community and they have a territory border that they defend, and there's no mixing of individuals. And when individuals transfer between groups, it's very rare, or comparatively rare to what happens in baboons, where there's multiple males leaving the troop and then coming into the troop in every year. So there's a lot of chance for individuals to not only come up with the same results to novel problems, but also to learn from new individuals who transfer into the group. Okay, and then the third thing that I think might be going on, other than the not looking, is that baboons have irregular innovations and no arbitrary behaviours. So baboons don't often come up with new behavioural styles, which makes it very difficult to observe when a new behavioural style transmits through a group. And the other thing is the arbitrary behaviours. So I'm just going to assume that you don't know about the capuchins being really weird. Capuchin monkeys, males, play this weird trust game with each other, where they'll stick their fingers in each other's eyes or in each other's mouth. So they'll sit there with their finger in the other individual's mouth, who will bite down on their finger, it's weird. Or they'll sit there with their finger in the other individual's eye. And this is culturally transmitted, and it's only in some groups and not in others. It's incredibly weird. But it's easy to say that this is cultural because it's very, like, there doesn't seem to be any adaptive value to this behaviour. So it's not, there are no arbitrary behaviours in the baboons, which is why people, I think, aren't looking. So they're not weird like capuchins. Okay, so a combination of incredibly rapid information diffusion, extensive home range overlap, and irregular innovation leads to population-wide behavioural homogeneity. So it means that at least within a population, it's very difficult to say that there are differences between groups, and so I think nobody looks between populations. Okay, so if we go back to, this is just I guess a diagram of that kind of model. So in the baboons, if one group innovates a novel behaviour, incorporates a new food into their diet, for example, it'll incredibly rapidly spread throughout the group, right? But in the chimps, for example, if we're going to compare them to chimps, which is not a very fair thing to do, but it'll be something like this. So it'll spread very, very slowly, and it's more likely that you'll end up seeing this behaviour in transition and not yet adopted population-wide. Okay, cool. Right, and so just a couple more points on animal culture. So meerkats teach, I had to get meerkats in there. Meerkats actually teach their young how to handle scorpions. So meerkats love scorpions, it's their favourite prey, but they're obviously not a very nice animal to handle. And so there's a very, very prescribed way that the helpers present scorpions to pups so that pups learn to better handle the prey. So this is classically, because it's teaching, actual teaching in an animal, in the wild, it should be cultural. But because every single meerkat group does it, it's not claimed as being cultural. At least that's what I think is going on. And if you contrast that with the capuchin example, where they've got these arbitrary behaviours that are really, really weird, those ones are cultural because they're weird. I hope that makes sense. Okay, cool. That's it. I have a lot of this is my model for information transmission that I didn't go into, but it's very pretty, so I put it up anyway. I have to thank all these people who let me, who either collected my data for me or let me parasitize their field season. And thanks for listening.